This is Caring for Kids on News Talk 760 WJR. Presented by the Children's Foundation. And here's your host, President and CEO of the Children's Foundation, Larry Burns.
Thanks, Mark, and hello, everyone, and welcome to our December edition of Caring for Kids. It's our last show of 2020. It's been a great year of shows. It's been an unusual year, of course, but we've had a great Caring for Kids episode month after month. On tonight's show, we'll be speaking to some fabulous guests who are all playing an active role in making their community better. Joining us will be Robert Stennett. Robert is the Chief Executive Officer of the Ben Hogan Foundation. Alexander Zonjic, renowned jazz flautist and a good friend of the Children's Foundation. And Rick Sperling, he's the founder of the new initiative, Detroit Excellence in Youth Arts. It's all coming up next right here on Caring for Kids on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR.
It's Caring for Kids with Larry Burns.
Welcome back, everybody. Larry Burns here, December edition of Caring for Kids. Happy holidays to everybody. Our first guest is Robert Stennett. Robert is the Chief Executive Officer of the Ben Hogan Foundation. Prior to his role, Robert was a business leader in the aerospace industry for nearly a quarter of a century. As a member of Shady Oaks Country Club since 1984, and a dependent member before that, Robert had the opportunity to observe Mr. Hogan for almost 2 decades before the legendary golfer passed away in 1997. Robert served on the Board of Governors at Shady Oaks Country Club from 2001 to 2011, serving as president of the club in his last year on the board. It's my pleasure to welcome from Fort Worth, Texas, today, Robert Stennett. So, Robert, the Ben Hogan Foundation is synonymous with golf, of course, but also perseverance and integrity. And for our listeners in the Detroit area, in Michigan, and well beyond, tell them about the Ben Hogan Foundation and some of the most important things you want everyone to know.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you for having me on your show. With the Ben Hogan Foundation, it was established by Mr. Hogan's great niece, who is Lisa Scott, and she was the heir to Mr. Hogan's estate as he had no children. And then we're a fairly young foundation. In about 2007, we established the Ben Hogan Foundation with a pretty simple mission, and that mission was just to honor the legacy and celebrate the life of the late, great Ben Hogan. We have a yearly golf tournament that we have about 200 soldiers play in, and we do some things with the families just to kind of give the soldiers a day off and allow us to serve them for a day. So youth development, education, and honoring the military are the three core components of what we do to celebrate Mr. Hogan.
Those are 3 wonderful components. And so we're talking with Robert Stennett, who's the CEO of the Ben Hogan Foundation. And Robert, I was recently in Fort Worth, and you treated me so kindly. So thank you to you and Julie and everyone else. And I had the opportunity to see the Ben Hogan Learning Center at the First Tee of Fort Worth. And it was so very impressive. There's another one under construction serving another part of Fort Worth. And so tell us about your involvement with the Ben Hogan Foundation and First Tee, because as you know, with Donna Bonk as one of our new board members, she's on your board. The Children's Foundation is now operating the First Tee of Greater Detroit, and someday we hope to be as strong as the Fort Worth First Tee. But tell us about the Ben Hogan Learning Center in Fort Worth.
Well, we treated you kindly, Larry, because we want you to come back and see us again.
Oh, you can count on that. Trust me.
We'd love for you to come back and visit again, and we hope you'll do it often. You know, I mentioned earlier youth development, as one of our core tenets. And early in our foundation, we were trying to think of the best way to accomplish this. And that was pretty early when the chapter of the First Tee of Fort Worth was established. They were only a year or two old. And we became so very impressed with the First Tee. And not only was it teaching young people the game of golf, which Mr. Hogan would appreciate, but more importantly, it was teaching the young people character and honesty and integrity and those 9 core values that they have in their curriculum that they work to instill in the young people. So we saw a pretty neat partnership and we saw pretty neat synergy there. If you think about an iconic example in the world of sports of an individual that stood for honesty and integrity and perseverance and those things. What better example than Ben Hogan? So we decided that we wanted to help them build a facility in Mr. Hogan's name. And in 2011, we created the Ben Hogan Learning Center and opened it here in Fort Worth. And, early in the program, they had about 300 or 400 kids. And this last year, we had 40,000.
Right, 40,000. So
just phenomenal growth numbers. The First Tee of Fort Worth has the highest retention rate in the world. 87% of the kids come back, and most of those that don't come back graduate high school, and they're not eligible to come back. So we have a terrific retention rate. We have terrific growth in the program. And I think one of the most powerful statistics I have ever seen is if a young person in the First Tee of Fort Worth achieves birdie level, the second level, they have a 100% graduation rate from the Fort Worth Independent School District. So we, similar to Detroit, we are struggling with our public education, do not have perhaps the best statistics, but a young person that achieves birdie level, every single one of them graduate high school, which is a compelling statistic on success.
Well, it says so much about what life skills and perseverance these kids are learning from First Tee, and then also combined with the important elements of the Ben Hogan Foundation. It's a formula for success, and the statistics certainly drive that home. So congratulations about that.
Thank you. Yeah. The First Tee had already created, their 9 core values, but whenever we looked at the synergy between how Mr. Hogan lived his life and how he exemplified those core values, we thought, what a better way to do that than with a partnership with the First Tee.
Yeah, and there's another learning center under construction, and that's going to be opening up in the not-too-distant future as well.
We do. We were out there last week working some of the artwork that we're going to put in there, but we are looking to have and would love for you to come in for it. But I think we're going to have a ribbon cutting on March the 26th.
Oh, okay.
Here for our second Ben Hogan Learning Center in Fort Worth. Right. And they have a pretty similar statistic out there. We started doing some after-school programming a few years ago, and we had 30 kids in it. And this year we had 1,200.
Wow, 30 to 1,200.
30 to 1,200. So
wow.
A pretty nice slope on that curve.
Yeah, not only did I have the opportunity to spend time with you and your executive director, but also Kevin Long from the First Tee, and he's one of the best executive directors in the country, and the statistics prove that as well. So what a great combination of people and programs. So we're talking with Robert Stennett from the Ben Hogan Foundation, headquartered in Fort Worth, Texas. Great place. And so, Robert, as we come to the end of 2020, and many of us are applauding that for obvious reasons, what's in store for the foundation in 2021? What are you looking forward to as the year starts over?
Well, we have a big year planned because many of our things in 2020 were deferred because of COVID, and we hope that we get the pandemic behind us sooner than later. But early on in the year, we are working to put another documentary together on Mr. Hogan. We're working with Charles Schwab, who does a series they started about 3 years ago called the Charles Schwab Challenger Series. And they do 3 of these a year, and Mr. Hogan will be the first. So we are working with a production company and here in January and February and putting that together. In the spring, we'll be having the ribbon cutting for the second Ben Hogan Learning Center.
Right.
We'll do 19 full and partial scholarships that we'll do the selections in the spring to honor Mr. Hogan. We've become more and more active with our golf tournament with the PGA Tour stop that we do here in Fort Worth. We'll do a military appreciation event in the spring, and then in the summer, I hope we're coming to Detroit, Michigan,
wow,
to help my friend Larry Burns put on one of the best golf tournaments that they've ever seen in Detroit to raise funds for the First Tee of Greater Detroit.
Wow, now if you could see me, you'd see how much I'm smiling and jumping up and down. So well, that sounds like a wonderful year. And the last thing you mentioned excites me even the most, but everything is great. I wanted our listeners to know that Mr. Hogan had a major victory in Detroit, in the Detroit area, and what a nice connection that is. And it's one of the things that you and I have talked about, of taking that connection, taking the things that you mentioned about developing youth and the First Tee of Greater Detroit, and working together with the First Tee of Greater Detroit and the Ben Hogan Foundation. So that, to me, would be the best way to launch this new first tee in Detroit. So what are your thoughts about...
Well, we developed a lot of friends up there, and about 5 years ago, a prominent vascular surgeon up there named Dr. Bill Ward contacted us to come up to Oakland Hills and help them celebrate their 100th birthday. And we went up, and that's where we got to know our friend Donna Bonk. She was our point of contact for putting a tournament on up there, but we wanted to go up. And they contacted us because, as you and I'm sure many of your listeners know, Mr. Hogan won the 1951 U.S. Open there at Oakland Hills, just outside of Detroit. And actually, in his final round, they had brought Robert Trent Jones in. This was one of the first times the USGA had brought in an architect to toughen up a golf course, but they tried to make a golf course that you couldn't break par on. And they made one of the toughest, if not the toughest, test of golf ever created. And actually, in the whole tournament, for 4 days, there was only 2 subpar rounds. Wow. Shot in that golf tournament. And one of those was the last day of Mr. Hogan shooting a 67.
Wow.
And he declared that whenever he finished it, he said something to the effect of, "I brought Oakland Hills, quote, the monster, end quote, to his knees." And Oakland Hills just grasped that moniker, and they love
to this day
being named the monster. But but Mr. Hogan would tell you that he shot one of the greatest rounds of golf in his life there at Oakland Hills in the final round of the 1951 U.S. Open there at Oakland Hills.
Well, and we want to bring that to the modern day with our partnership, so that you mentioned, and you and I are going to be working with Donna and others on coming up with our plan, and we'll keep our listeners aware of that. But the date is August 9th, 2021. The location is the Detroit Golf Club, which, as everybody knows listening, is now the home of the Rocket Mortgage Classic, which is benefiting many of the youth development programs in the community and helping break down the great digital divide that exists in Detroit and helping kids learn in the new way, particularly during this pandemic. So, Robert Stennett, I'm looking forward to not only my next visit to Fort Worth, which hopefully there'll be many, but our partnership as you come to Detroit and help us help the kids of Detroit. So,
and I'll tell you, Larry, if your listeners play in your golf tournament, they'll be able to do something that they've never been able to do in a golf tournament in the United States of America ever.
And what's that?
And that is, one of the opportunities they will have is on one of the holes, they'll have an opportunity to hit one of Mr. Hogan's drivers on that hole.
Wow.
As a part of the tournament. So we will do some fun things to celebrate the wonderful Hogan legacy, and we'll put on a great event, and we'll raise a lot of money for the First Tee of Greater Detroit.
Absolutely, and we want to have one of our own learning centers, just like Fort Worth. So that's the goal, and you're helping us get there, and you're doing so very much, not only Fort Worth, but surrounding area now, looking to help people in Detroit as well, particularly young kids. So, Robert, thank you very much for all you're doing and for being on Caring for Kids and being such a wonderful host when I was visiting a few short weeks ago.
It's been a pleasure to be on your show, Larry.
Okay, that was Robert Stennett of the Ben Hogan Foundation, and coming up next, we're going to hear from my good friend Alexander Zonjic when Caring for Kids continues here on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR.
Welcome back to Caring for Kids on WJR, presented by the Children's Foundation.
Welcome back, everybody. Enjoyed interviewing my friend Robert Stennett from the Ben Hogan Foundation. The best part of that was that Robert announced that the Ben Hogan Foundation is going to be involved in our golf outing benefiting the First Tee of Greater Detroit on August 9th, 2021. I participated in one of their outings, and I got to tell you, it was the finest charity golf outing I've ever been involved in. So more to come on that. Now, next is my good friend, Alexander Zonjic. Alexander has been a student of music since the young age of 9 in his hometown of Windsor, Ontario, where he also completed his Bachelor of Musical Arts degree at the University of Windsor. AZ, as we like to call him, has performed on stages all around the world, including Japan, England, the Philippines, Mexico, and many other countries. He's played with some of jazz music's biggest stars, including Kurt Whalum, Harvey Mason, Angela Bofill, and many, many more that he keeps adding each year. Serving as the artistic director for nearly a dozen music festivals and concerts throughout Michigan and beyond, and his own performance schedule typically keeps him busy all summer long, as well as into the winter. But with most events shelved this year due to the coronavirus, AZ was able to find time to finish his first album in more than 10 years. Playing It Forward, his 13th album, was released in October of this year with his own label, High Flutant Music. So this album is off to a great start. I hear songs on Watercolors on Sirius XM all the time. Alexander Zonjic, welcome to Caring for Kids. It's great to hear your voice, and it's even better to hear your new music, which I listen to frequently. So congratulations.
Well, I appreciate it. You and the foundation have been great supporters, mutually supporting one another, but thank you so much. Great to be on your show.
Well, thank you, and I'm serious. Congratulations on the success of your new album, Playing It Forward. I know it took a lot of your time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears because you produced it yourself on your own label. And then most importantly, I guess, the Motor City Sway song as a single has been a huge hit. I hear it all the time on Watercolors and Sirius XM. So congratulations, and tell our listeners a little bit about that journey.
Well, I will tell you, no one certainly expected the whole reality we're living in right now. And it started out with a lot of uncertainty for all of us artists, including, a lot of folks that I was interviewing for my radio show, Kenny G and Dave Cause and Nick Colleone and Jeff Lorber. The decision was we were all finishing projects right around the time that COVID shut us all down, which would, if we go back to March,
right,
we all know the reality of what happened there in early March. And so it started out with a little confusion. Should we release these records? Should we not? Is it a good time? Is it a bad time? Will our concerts come back? Will we be able to tour and support our projects? And as it turns out, without a doubt, it was a really good move. Being able to work on a project like this with all of my friends and mix it and record it, have it almost ready, and to be able to collaborate with the people that, as you know, there's a lot of great people on this record. I have to say, Playing It Forward was really a dream come true for me in terms of dealing with COVID, then doing a cool video and all of that. So I'm glad you asked the question because it's been my, I wouldn't say standard answer, it's been my real answer for so many interviews I've been doing. I'm going to always remember the release of this record because it was totally unique compared to all the other records. Larry, I've been making records. My first record came out 42 years ago.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
So, and in this one, I happen to think if it's not your best, it certainly is right up there. And people that haven't heard it yet need to know who else is on it and how it's being received.
Well, I appreciate that. And of course, you mentioned Sirius Watercolors. They couldn't be more supportive. Every week I get my radio reports, and we have, this week when the report came out, we were tied for the most play that anyone's getting on that station. So for whatever reason, it hit a nerve with them too, and it hit a nerve internationally. But, Jeff Lorber is probably obviously legendary keyboard player and no stranger to any of our fans out there who are jazz fans. Larry, you met him way back when we performed at University of Toledo for you. When it came to this project, the roles were very much reversed. Jeff Lorber was the real inspiration behind pushing me, and you got to get this done, and challenging me musically. So Jeff Lorber, big part of the record. James Lloyd, my friend, who, even though he only produced one song on the whole record, it happened to be the first single, and it happened to be a hit. And right. James Lloyd, for a lot of folks who don't know it, is really one of the architects of this famous band, Pieces of a Dream. Mm-hmm. You throw in a lot of the industry real legends that are on this record, including Paul Jackson Jr., the amazing guitar player, Michael Thompson, who's probably one of LA's #1 session players, Gary Novak, the great drummer. On a sad note, but also very inspiring note, to have Chuck Loeb, the legendary guitarist, on the record, probably some of the last stuff he ever recorded, interestingly enough. He wrote a song and played on 3 other tracks. We've got our 13-year-old genius who is now getting airplay all over the world with his own record. We've got Justin Schultz on the record. We've got great Detroit connections with Selected of God Gospel Choir. So if all of that sounds like fun, Larry, that's exactly what it was. It was great collaborations, and I couldn't be more thrilled with the results.
Yeah, we're talking with Alexander Zonjic. We're talking about his new album, which is Playing It Forward. If you just think about what you've done, we had Jeff Lorber, and then you have Justin Schultz. I mean, how many generations between them? And Justin now, as you mentioned, has his own record out. He has his own play on the likes of Watercolors. He's being mentioned. I heard him mentioned on Dave Caz's show on Sundays. And you were and are instrumental in helping that young man. He's a young boy, launch his career. So it's got to make you proud.
I just feel really lucky that his father reached out to me. He wanted to introduce Justin to me. He wanted me to introduce Justin to Jeff Lorber. They came to a festival that you're very well aware of, the Shoreline Jazz Festival in Muskegon,
right,
where we made our introduction. That's where I first met him. He didn't perform yet, but that's where I met him. And then from that point on, I will tell you, even at this ripe old age and as long as I've done this, there is nothing more thrilling than to be on stage with a kid like that reminds all of us, every time you perform with him, why we ever wanted to do this to begin with. It's pure joy when he performs, when he smiles. I know you've seen him. There's videos. He has this huge, huge social networking following. And how magical to have him be a big part of even Motor City Sway, where he sings and he does that great talk box solos.
And getting a little bit serious now, and you mentioned it earlier, but speaking of COVID, your world was turned upside down, impacted traumatically, particularly as you were looking toward record years of your summer festivals and events. The last 10 months, we've been in this weird predicament. We started a little bit, now we're back pausing. And you've reinvented some things by working with some organizations, many of them nonprofits, many of them just iconic names in the nonprofit field, with virtual events and turning those into something that people not only enjoy, but they're also successful events. Tell us a little bit about those.
A lot of us questioned this virtual stuff early on. We didn't really know how to embrace it. And is it really a fair representation, a high-level representation of what we do? You know, you were the source of a lot of joy for us being able to play the Derby Party back in September, because at that point, that was one of maybe 3-4 things we did all summer. And then here comes the virtual stuff where we can take our TV assets and our expertise with making television shows. That's how we did that really cool Motor City Sway video. Now we're continuing in that same spirit with our expertise and looking forward to coming up in January, and we're already working on it because it's very ambitious, to putting together a big virtual event for COTS. And for folks who know that organization, they know all the great work they do and how long they've been around and how successful they've been. Coalition on Temporary Shelter is basically the initials there, but boy, they do so much more than that. So they normally, Larry, do a big event at the Gem Theater that I'm a part of called Soup City, and they've turned it into Soup City, a virtual house party.
All right. Speaking of a great experience, you mentioned the video, Motor City Sway, that you recorded at Hart Plaza as well as the Motown Museum. And now there's a contest. So tell our listeners as we come to a close on what that is and how they might get involved.
We're going to interview folks. We're going to post their videos. And it's kind of a way in the middle of COVID to keep the Motor City Sway magic alive, you know, sway to win.
So how do they participate?
Well, you know, we're asking people to basically download the video or use the single, do a 60 to 90 minute video of you dancing. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Singles, dance groups. We've already had videos come in. We've had dance troops. We had one young lady in front of a garage all by herself outside. It's been so cool. Make the video and then basically send it in. You can certainly go to zonjic.com, zonjic.com, and right there on my homepage, you'll see all of the basic instructions on there. And just get involved in it. We're urging people, Larry, to put their own spin on it, because I think that's going to be the fun part of it. If you watch the video, we had ballroom dancers, and we had hustlers, so to speak, you know, doing the hustle, Detroit hustle.
Right.
I'm hoping, Larry, with any luck, that Larry Burns and friends and his team from the Children's Foundation will enter the contest.
I need to thank you personally and now publicly, because you're allowing us on Caring for Kids to use Motor City Sway as our theme song. So thank you.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
I love the vibe of that. I love how Detroit-centric it is. And so hats off, and appreciate it so much. Larry, you're welcome to any songs I have. And
well, thank you, Alexander.
And I'm glad you picked that one. And I will say, Larry, from the beginning, I think you were more confident about the success of this record than I was. The only reason I say that is because I love all my records. They're all like my kids. It takes so long to create them. But you had an instinct for it. And you're also a big fan. You're not a casual fan. You really embrace music. You're a real audiophile, and I really loved your support from day one on this.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was easy once I heard individual songs you sent me and then the whole record, and I knew it was going to be a home run. So thank you, Alexander Zonjic, for all you're doing in the community and for the allowing us during this COVID to listen to music and to make lemonade out of lemons, as you mentioned. So thank you very much. So that's Alexander Zonjic, my good friend and wonderful musician and artist. So next, we're going to hear from Rick Sperling about how he is bringing the arts music, and other things to children in Detroit. And that's when Caring for Kids continues. Here on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR.
Welcome back to Caring for Kids on WJR. Presented by the Children's Foundation. Once again, here's Larry Burns.
Rick Sperling is the CEO of Sperling Art Strategies, the lead arts consultant for Detroit Public Schools Community District. Rick is also the founder of Mosaic Youth Theater of Detroit, one of the nation's top creative youth development organizations, which he led for 27 years before passing on the baton. During his tenure, Mosaic toured all teen productions to Africa, Asia, Europe, and 30 states throughout the United States and Canada, and established ongoing partnerships with the Public Theater in New York and the Stratford Shakespeare Festival in Ontario, Canada. For his work with Mosaic, Rick was named a Detroit News Michigander of the Year and given the Detroit Free Press Award for Lifetime Achievement in Theater. So, Rick, you have had a wonderful history of being a leader in creative youth development efforts, particularly as the founder of Mosaic Youth Theater of Detroit. Can you give our listeners sort of a view of your journey and where you have come from, where you are today, and then we can talk a little bit about where you hope to go?
Well, I think it has to start with the fact that I am a product of youth theater, doing theater from the time I was 4 years old. And what was even more powerful is that I grew up with a speech impediment that I still have a little bit. But the theater for me was the place that I felt at home. I felt comfortable. I felt like I belonged, and I never stuttered on stage, if you can imagine that. Mm-hmm. So that taught me very early on that the arts has powers that go beyond just being a movie star. Years later, I started to act professionally, and after college, I was ready to pursue a career as a professional actor and a director, and I got a job at the Attic Theater, which is no longer around, but
right, I remember.
One of the major regional theaters in Detroit, major regional theaters in the country for many years, and I got the job of being their education and outreach director. And my job was to go into the Detroit schools and to bring theater and music to those students. And it was a transformative experience for me because I not only was amazed that these young people did not have the opportunities that I had as a young person growing up in Ann Arbor, but also I saw it having that same incredible impact on these students. And I was blown away by the talent and the incredible potential of these young people. That led me a couple years later to founding Mosaic Youth Theater of Detroit, which I ran for 27 years. And had the opportunity to train thousands of young people in this past, before the pandemic, the 20 months before the pandemic, we had 5 of our alumni appear on Broadway, including one who won a Tony Award.
Wow. And
we have young people that are in all different parts of the entertainment industry, but also young people outside of the entertainment industry that are lawyers and social workers and teachers. But they talk about that experience in Mosaic as being that time where, like I was when a child, that gave them a sense of belonging, gave them a sense of the kind of skills and professionalism that they needed to be good in whatever they did. And then I retired a year ago, September, from Mosaic, and was thrilled to hand off the reins to one of my alumni. And I've been focusing ever since on other initiatives that can transform the lives of young people through the arts.
Yeah, we're talking with Rick Sperling, who was the founder of Mosaic Youth Theater of Detroit, and now has started a new initiative that is addressing the COVID-19 environment as well. And you and I met several months ago and talked about some things that we wanted to do together. And so tell our listeners about what this new exciting initiative is all about.
Well, I am now a consultant. I'm part of the consultant world, and I'm a full-time consultant right now for the Detroit Public Schools Community District. And in my role, I was developing these levels of arts excellence, especially focusing on Detroit School of the Arts and 4 middle school feeders. And we had great plans for this year, and most of them never happened because of the pandemic. I always had a plan that I wanted to institute, which was to do private lessons for music students, because we saw that as the area of the greatest inequity nationally as well as locally, that the students that got private lessons in instrumental music, it was still very, very based on class if you were able to get those, and that made such a huge difference. Well, when the pandemic hit, we decided that we needed to focus completely on this concept of private lessons, but expand it, not just instrumental music, but to vocal music, to dance, to theater, to visual art, to multimedia, and also to create small cohort groups. So that was kind of a sweet spot. So in a year where we felt that it was going to be really hard for art students at Detroit Public Schools Community District to have really rigorous training, this was an opportunity to give them that, as well as to give them mentors that they would be working with the entire year. So we got 13 arts organizations, including the Detroit Symphony Orchestra and the College for Creative Studies and my old organization, Mosaic Youth Theater, and Sphinx organization, to all provide mentors that we would pay to work with these students throughout the entire year. So they were getting that rigor, but they were also having a connection to caring adults who are really, really challenging them to do their best. So we called the program, and we still call it Ramp Up, RAMP-UP, and that stands for Rigorous Arts Mentorship Program under Pandemic. We hope to continue it after the pandemic, but it's made such an incredible difference to so many kids' lives this year in such a challenging year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rick Sperling, you've also partnered with the Children's Foundation regarding this new initiative. And so how is that working, and what's that all about?
Well, that is tremendously exciting. And as you know, me and you spoke about that before the pandemic.
Right.
I really felt that there needed to be funding that was specifically geared to youth arts. I had some conversations with you and your staff at the Children's Foundation about developing a fund, an initiative that would focus all of its energies on youth arts in Detroit and nothing less. And it's been a thrill to work with you and your staff on developing DEA, another acronym, and that stands for Detroit Excellence in Youth Arts. And when it became clear that we weren't going to do Ramp Up, it allowed me to come back to you all and say, you know what, rather than waiting until the pandemic is over, this is actually the right time, the perfect time to start this fund so that we can support this work that is so important to these young people during the pandemic.
Well, and you've done an excellent job of getting supporters to get us started, and we've already made several grants to mentors so they could start mentoring. And so I'm very excited about our launch and how things are going so far. And one of the things that hit home to me when you and I first chatted is the Children's Foundation is now all about keeping children and young adults and families on the right path to have successful, rewarding lives. And a lot of times, as we all know, sports are used to do that, to get kids involved in basketball or football or soccer. And a lot of times the arts are kind of ignored as it relates to that pathway to success. So when we chatted, it just was a home run to me to utilize the resources and some of the tools of the Children's Foundation to help kids, underserved kids, fulfill some thoughts and dreams about music or art and dancing, and use that as pathways to keeping their lives straight and narrow and successful. So early on when we chatted, it was a natural fit to me, and then you figured out how we're going to get it going. So it's been a great partnership so far.
What I've experienced in my life with Mosaic and other organizations is that there's something about arts excellence that really sets young people, we call it now creative youth development, that really sets them on that path that you talk about. In our 27 years at Mosaic, my 27 years, more than 95% of the kids who performed with us went to college.
95%.
Over 95%. And a vast majority of those young people graduated from college. Many have gone on to get PhDs and other advanced degrees. And there's something, like you say, I think the arts does everything that sports does in terms of striving for excellence and teamwork, but it adds all levels of creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, all these other elements that kids love to do, but it also really, really prepares them for a successful, healthy life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to me, that was a natural, and we figured that out. And so 2021, let's assume we get out of this pandemic sometime during the course of the year. What's on the agenda for all your activities?
Well, our first part of our agenda is to finish fundraising for Ramp Up. I'm proud to say that not just with DEA, but with DPS Foundation, the Skillman Foundation, the Knight Foundation, many other organizations, we have raised over 85% of the entire $460,000 budget. A lot of that coming from Detroit Public Schools themselves. We have great leadership with Dr. Reedy. So we still have $65,000 to raise. We have enough money for this mentorship program to go through January into February, but we want these young people to have these mentors all the way to the end of the school year. So we definitely are continuing to fundraise and support this. So far, like I said, over 86% has been raised, and so we've gotten tremendous support. Now we have to finish that.
To keep it going, yes.
Yeah, keep it going. And then once the pandemic is over, really what we want to do is create as many opportunities for Detroit young people to have these experiences of excellence. But we also want to be that fund that arts organizations know is going to help them to survive and continue to serve young people. We don't need to create another organization. We need to support the people that are out there doing fantastic work with young people. So that's going to be the focus moving forward.
And how can people that are listening that want to help, how can they help?
They can go right to the yourchildrensfoundation.org website, and under funding initiatives, they'll find DEYA, D-E-Y-A, and they can go to that. It tells you all about Ramp Up, as well as the fund itself, and gives you the information you need to donate to continue to support these incredible young people in Detroit, as well as these incredible organizations that are making this possible.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And Rick, congratulations on what you've done and what you're doing and where we're going together as partners. So Rick Sperling, thanks for all you're doing in the community.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be working with the Children's Foundation and very, very excited for what we're going to continue to do together.
All right, me too. And 2021 will be even better. And so coming up next, I'm going to provide an update on some foundation news right here on the great voice of the Great Lakes, News Talk 760 WJR. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. It was a great show with some great guests, and I want to thank everybody for a wonderful year for caring for kids. I hope everyone has a safe and healthy holiday season, and looking forward to continuing our conversations each month on caring for kids. And as we like to say, onward.
Caring for Kids with Larry Burns on WJR has been presented by the Children's Foundation.